for this particular session, you haven't learned your lines, obviously. So we'll give you some of the answers. To quote from one of the oldest playwrights, all the world's a stage. All men and women are merely players, and they have their exits and entrances. And one man in his time plays many parts. One man and one woman plays many parts, is Shakespeare. And who are we to argue with Shakespeare? So we also play many roles, whichever field you've come from. You might be playing the role of a healer, a doctor, health professional, teacher, administrator, social scientist, community health personnel, ethical policeman is maybe what we're trying to do. Police ourselves before we police other people. So all these different roles we have to play. And maybe theatre and the roles that we have to play on the stage will help us to understand this role of ours in the realm of an ethical community that we're going back to. Does anyone know the derivation of the word doctor?
Teach.
To teach. So teaching and communicating is a very, very important part of being a doctor. So any kind of doctoring that you're doing, it's very important that we communicate effectively. So some of the things that we were thinking of touching upon briefly or in the form of exercises during the course of today is things like voice, language, talking skills, much more important than talking skills, listening skills. Some of us very good at talking but have a problem with listening. And singularly, that is probably the most important part that we can learn from theatre and apply it to our careers wherever we go back to. Clarity of communication, non-verbal communication. It's not only talking, there are other ways in which we communicate. Team building, trust, learning to stick to a script where it's necessary, and also learning to think outside the box and innovating wherever it's necessary. So these are some of the things that we'll be trying to deal with. Very important part. I tell the interns when they come to us for the last training session is to learn to shut up occasionally and listen to what is being said. It seems to be some kind of a career impediment for people in the health field, is that we've got so used to talking to people, we forget to listen. And if we learn to listen to the patient, to the relative, to your peers, to people around you, what they're saying, then you'll be able to prevent yourself from making mistakes like the fresh PG sitting in front of me saying, "Are you married? How many children do you have?" In an Indian setting, after the patient has answered no, if you ask how many children do you have, it's considered disaster. Maybe for those of you who come from other countries where it's more advanced, it's all right to ask, "Are you married?" And if they say no, you can still ask how many children you have. But you have to be appropriate to the social setting that you are in. And right now, it will be complete disaster if you ask a series of questions without actually listening to the answer that the patient is giving you. Bad habits, I hope they don't start this early, but they do start early. And that is why, as far as bioethics is concerned, right from our role as parents or maybe as an elder sibling, and definitely as teachers and doctors and health professionals, it's very important for us to cut the bad habit very, very early, because ethics should be inculcated, and I'm sure the ICMR and those involved in medical education in the country today have realized that it should be part of the curriculum. How does it relate to theatre? There are certain important things when we start on a play. For example, if I'm directing a play, there are two things that I never compromise on. I tell the actors that it's important for them to know their lines right at the beginning, because without knowing your lines well, it's very difficult to get into the character and to do anything more related to the play. And blocking, what we call blocking as in on stage, where will you be standing, from which place to which place will you be moving, you need to know things like that. And these are the basic foundations of anything in a theatre performance. And in theatre performance, if you don't get your foundations right, then everything else is likely to go wrong. Similarly, I think in a medical curriculum, it's not important how much marks you got in biochemistry or whether you got the gold medal in medicine and gynecology or not. But if you don't have your basics as far as why did I join this profession and what am I going to do, what am I going to achieve as far as people are concerned, if that is not inculcated in the medical curriculum, and they also learn from their teachers. So what we do is what they learn. If that is not done early enough, then there's no point in any amount of bioethics courses being conducted later in the day. Basic ground rule for theatre, and definitely basic ground rule for life or ethical research or anything else that we are involved in: never start a project of any kind, whether it's a simple project like the one you see on the screen, any project, theatre project, ethics project, talking to somebody, teaching someone, especially as far as a research project is concerned, without adequate preparation. So this is some of the basics that you can learn from theatre, which is applicable to everything in life and definitely applicable to good ethics. For example, you have this extremely difficult pose from, I heard one of you all was learning yoga, from Iyengar Yoga, and Yogacharya Iyengar shows you how to practice this with the help of props. But a lot of us in doctors and professionals in the health field find that, okay, why do I have to bother to learn all this? I can learn the shortcut. So on Saturday evening, some of the St. John students will be found practicing the same yoga, but using a shortcut, unethical shortcut. So they reach the same end point, like in research, they will do their research on 5 patients and then extrapolate it to 50 patients. This kind of shortcut is always likely to be really bad for the back in the long run. So learn to do it the correct way, and if we learn to do it the correct way in theatre, through exercises and in life, we will be able to apply that to all forms of ethics also. We need to watch out for what we call in theatre as the wolf in sheep's clothing. That is, something looks nice, looks ethically acceptable on the surface, but if you dig deeper, you'll be able to find the actual purpose. So somebody coming to you and say, I want to give you a laptop, I want to give you a camera, and I want to take photographs of patients. And that's a very subtle way of doing the same thing without having a proper project, without going through ethical clearance and things like that. They'll be trying to make you do a research project on their product or their drug or their cream, I'm in dermatology. So that kind of thing where visually it's very important to take photographs. They'll make you do the same thing without going through the same protocol. So you need to scratch the surface. Again, talking like a dermatologist, you need to scratch the surface, dig deeper, and find out whether there is actually some lurking unethical project which is going on at the same time. In theatre also, many times you would have seen somebody, if you were watching a play or a movie, you'll see a character which on the surface appears very smooth, very nice, and they talk to you very sweetly. The lines are nice, but actually at the end of the movie or the play, you'll find out that the person is a villain. So don't wait till the end. Somewhere quickly in the beginning, learn to recognize the wolf in sheep's clothing. And so theatre kind of teaches you to recognize things like costumes, somebody wearing a cloak, looking different, which helps in a cover-up. So if you can apply that to research principles, then you'll be able to follow ethical research very easily without getting fooled. And you need to recognize all of them look really cute, but one of them is a little devil, and you need to be able to recognize that very early. So we need to pick out the little devil among the innocents and keep your index of suspicion high. So if you're able to do that in whatever field you are, I'd highly recommend reading a book called Freakonomics, where he mentions in a chapter, the chapter is titled something like, how are high school teachers like sumo wrestlers? Any of you have any guesses? Any connection between the Japanese sumo wrestler and the high school teacher? He's found that the amount of teaching in America in America, teaching and cheating should not be interchanged. In America, they find that the teacher is graded according to the results that the students get, and therefore there is a high incidence among American high school teachers to increase the grades of the students suddenly from 7th standard, so that it looks better on paper. Their students seem to be performing much better. So very subtly, the answers of the students get changed. It's written in pencil, and then they look like the teacher is performing well because the students are doing well, and so the grants to that particular school is increased from the American government. The same thing is done by sumo wrestlers when they know that if they lose a particular match, there's a chance that a weaker opponent will come into the finals. They tend to lose matches in which they can help a weaker opponent to come into the later rounds of the fight. So there is a very subtle way of cheating. Some of us we know our basic principles very clearly, but then the subtler ones, the blurred lines, we tend to ignore because it's become part of our life, and it's like, oh, it's all right. I mean, these are the done things. There are no done things. Things are very clearly in black and white, and the gray areas need to be outlined, and we need to decide whether we are going to step into those gray areas or not. So whenever you see any odd statistics when you're reviewing a paper or something like that, if you find it too good to be true, please watch out for anything that is too good to be true is probably not. I have a theatre story from the director in Tughlaq, in a play called Tughlaq, which is written by Girish Karnad, in which I had the fortune to act. We had a prayer scene where there were almost 40 people on stage, Muslim prayer. So we were supposed to be saying our daily prayer, and we had to bend down and touch the ground with our forehead. A lot of the relatively lazy actors used to just do that pretense, because when there are 40 people on stage, you can't really see if everybody is bending down completely and touching the floor. So our theatre director was cleverer than we are. On one day when we were doing, in spite of several rehearsals when we had been told to do it completely, before the rehearsal, he sprinkled charcoal powder, very finely ground charcoal powder on the ground, and then he made us do that prayer scene and then told all of us to line up on stage, and he could easily see the ones who had actually touched their forehead to the ground and the ones who had not. So things like that you can pick up, and that is useful. I mean, not this particular thing, you can't sprinkle charcoal powder on research projects, but there are ways in which you can pick up these things. And again, Freakonomics is a highly recommended book for you to read so that you learn to have a higher index of clinical suspicion. The other thing that we often use in life and in theatre is to use whatever is available instead of what is ideal or the best. Okay, I can't be bothered. It takes me time to reach till the towel, so I use the coat of the man in front of me and I finish the job. The basic thing is that the job should get done. But that is not acceptable as far as ethics are concerned. You can't just make do with whatever is available unless you're making sure that the patient or the concerned project is getting the best that is needed. In theatre, very often, like if we were to try and do the actual play here today, we had a scene with a barber in the play, and that is why we decided not to do the actual play in this room, because for theatre, a certain amount, you need a green room, you need a curtain, a place to enter, and things like that. So for the barber, if we decided we'll just compromise and we'll use one of these plastic chairs and pretend that he's the barber, then it'll be a compromise solution. It won't work out. When you see the CD, you'll be able to see the gentleman performing behind an actual barber's chair, pretending to cut a person's hair while he's telling you the particular message of the story. And you'll find that it's so much more effective when the correct props are used. So also there is no compromise unless you're doing one of the modern plays where the props or stage effects don't really matter at all. We need to be appropriate. Again, this is a controversial issue. I put it right there in the middle over there. The fact that we need to be appropriate. The Statue of Liberty dressed like that does not look very nice. Everything Western also may not be ideal for the local customs and ethos. As a practicing doctor, I often find people referring to this is not approved by the FDA. This has not been done in America, this is not done in Europe and things like that. Yes, the guidelines are very good, make use of the guidelines, but often we need to indigenize it to local customs to make sure that it's being appropriate to what we are doing over here. And bodies like the ICMR are very important, and workshops like this are very important, so that we just don't blindly take on things which are being done elsewhere and do the same thing. Now, I know that's controversial. Sometimes they say, are you modifying the rules? You're making it easier for research here. No, it need not be modified to be easier. It can be modified to be more appropriate. And that is why it's important we formulate our own guidelines, keeping to the broad principles which have been set. We need to formulate our own guidelines because we will find that it's slightly different for us. For example, there was a Reader's Digest survey on politeness. Have any of you read that? And they said Indians were one of the most impolite people. The kind of things that they based it on was on the road, checking out on people who said thank you, good morning, and opened the car door and things like that, which may not be appropriate to an Indian setting. Our idea of politeness is when a guest comes home, we make sure that you give them a glass of water and you're very good, kind to a guest, whereas an American will probably shut the door if you've rung the doorbell at a time where you haven't called and told him. We would consider that impolite, and they would consider somebody getting up and saying good morning, sir, not polite at all, because we haven't done the thing that according to the Western concept is considered polite. So when you have a survey like that which is global, you have to modify the ideas of politeness based on the local area that you're in. For example, a Broadway play. I've seen a performance of Shakespeare in England in which all the characters were completely without clothing in the play, and it did not look bad because it was in an appropriate setting. Imagine doing that in today's Mumbai. I think it will be very inappropriate to do something like that. It needs to be censored to local sensibilities so that it is not offensive. While I'm saying this, the contents of the play are offensive to many people, the play that we'll be doing, because we have decided for the sake of an exercise to choose topics which are normally not discussed. This all started for me, other than the Art of Science workshop. It started for me when I was taking an STD class for the students, and I found that many of the students would not meet my eye when I was talking to them about topics. And when I asked them a simple question like, how do you ask a patient for a history of exposure? None of them had the answer. None of them knew how to ask it in the local language in an appropriate manner. I'll use the sentence in Kannada, but you can probably translate into whatever language you come from. The kind of question that they were asking me was, Sharirika Sambandha ittidira, or horgade, something like that, which was not the kind of language that you use to patients. It is almost Sanskritized language, which the patient cannot understand. In Kannada, it would be something simple like, Kone sati yavaga horgade hogidira, when did you go out? I mean, literally translated, it means that. So they were unable to meet my eye, and they were unable to discuss issues, and I found it very upsetting for me as a teacher that somebody whom I was training to be a doctor is tomorrow going to go out and be ready to counsel patients or take history from patients and be unable to ask a question on history of exposure. So when I challenged them and I said, how come you're not comfortable with this and you don't want to deal with it? They said it's never been done. They don't know how to deal with issues like this. And as doctors, if we can't deal with these issues comfortably, then how are we going to be able to tell others to deal with it or tackle a patient who's come up with a problem? If you don't make eye contact with the patient and you're not talking to them in a manner that makes them comfortable, they will not come out with a history of exposure at all. And we've done a study in St. John's itself where the same patient was asked a question on history of exposure, and when somebody who was trained in counseling was asking the history, we had a hit rate of about 75 to 80%, and in students who were not trained in counseling, the hit rate was about 5 to 10%. They would give history of exposure in a very low percentage of patients. So it's very important that we have comfort levels in these things so that we're able to discuss it. So I'm going to be borderline offensive in the performances that you're going to see, so that the comfort level is raised and you know that any particular issue, if you want, you should be able to discuss it. We need to have reasonable expectations. A lot of our patients, again coming back to my background as a dermatologist and a cosmetologist who does laser surgery, I find that a lot of my patients are coming with unreasonable expectations. They want to improve the Mona Lisa. They don't like what they have right now, and they don't realize that it's already a masterpiece. They've been sent down as a masterpiece, but they want things according to, maybe this you can take as a Western concept of beauty. They want things different from what they are, and they want to have an end point which is not a reasonable expectation. Again, as far as research is concerned, or when you're speaking to a patient or dealing with a medical problem, you need to make sure that you're having reasonable expectations from your patient is having reasonable expectations from the treatment. You're treating somebody with end-stage cirrhosis of the liver, and they ask you, doctor, will I get better soon? There is a way of conveying the same thing without being dishonest. There is a way of speaking to somebody. So there is a method of doing this without lying to the patient. At the same time, they need to have reasonable expectations. So you can't be sweet to them, hold their hand and say, don't worry, everything will be all right, you'll get better, and we're discharging you next week, you'll be fine, go back home and lead a normal life. It's not correct, and the ethical issues that we stand on those kind of things are very subtle and need to be inculcated very early in the medical career so that doctors are not making mistakes. Yes, we need sponsors for research. That is a fact of life. It's a necessary evil if you want, but how to use this without being used? So you have to use the money, the sponsorship money, everything needs to be used, but you should make sure that you and the patient are not being used. So the same thing comes from theatre. When we see for a play, for example, there's a product placement. If you watch movies nowadays, you'll find very distinctly Amitabh Bachchan standing somewhere next to money transfer or something like that and getting money from his son, and that kind of stops the flow of the movie because it's obvious that they want to advertise for a particular product. In the course of a play that we are doing, maybe the barber can talk about Brill cream or something else, or the young man who's sitting at a bar and having a drink and talking to his friends can suddenly lift up a particular bottle of alcohol and show it to you. That is also product placement and sponsorship, but we have to know how to get some kind of sponsorship from people who can afford it and who have budgeted in sponsorship without selling our soul. And it's very important that we walk on the line without falling to either side so that our ethical principles are still maintained. One day that I was here earlier in this workshop, there was a talk about the principal investigator taking on too many projects. This is something like what we're seeing over here, trying to do too much, too many projects for principal investigator, and too many plays for one actor. The same time you find one actor who's good in a small city like Bangalore, or even in Mumbai, I think. If somebody is good, then he'll be offered several roles in movies or several roles in plays, and he's not able to give the appropriate time for everything so that he does a bad job in every play. And the same for a principal investigator. Unless he has got good co-investigators who are going to do the job, and he's delegating jobs, and he's mainly in a supervisory role. This slide is to show you good communication. Now, a teenager might understand by a balanced diet that she has junk food on either side, which is well balanced, but that is not what you're trying to say. So very often as a doctor or as a theatre person, when you're communicating, if you use jargon, if you say, okay, Aisha, you must make sure that you have a balanced diet, all right? You're eating good food, no, make sure you're having a balanced diet. And this is probably what she understands from a balanced diet. A little bit of junk in the morning, a little bit of junk in the evening, balances it out in both parts of the day. So sometimes we understand what we're talking about, but nobody else understands that. So make sure that what you say is being understood. And as a doctor, a very good example and a good ethical principle to follow is, after you explain the prescription or what you wanted to say to them, ask for a repeat back test. That is, give them the prescription and say, now I've explained the medicine to you. Will you tell me how to take the tablet? So they'll tell you that, I think you should take one morning. I forgot, doctor, is it after breakfast or before breakfast? Now then, in that repeat back test, a lot of things get clarified, because otherwise they go back home and then they don't have the doctor to access, and all their doubts come at that time. So it's very important to for ourselves to follow and to teach students to follow this repeat back test. It hardly takes 30 seconds or a minute, and the doctor is able to communicate much more effectively. The same for a research project. Often when we find a project protocol coming and the informed consent sheet is in English, they say translate into local language. A lot of the things are written in a Kannada or a Malayalam or Telugu or Punjabi colloquialism, and when it's back translated into English, it sounds ridiculous. So that back translation part in research is very important, so that you're not giving some wrong information, because you can't read Kannada, you give it to the patient and said, read all this, and if you've understood properly what it is, then you sign here. Now that is not good informed consent unless you know exactly what is on that sheet. In theatre and medicine also, being understood is of primary importance. There's no point in me doing a play here if I'm doing it for a purpose. I'm doing one small theatre piece to you, and the purpose of the play is not understood at all. You go home saying, Chanagittu, the lights and all were nice, bahut acha tha, but I didn't understand. What is that man trying to say finally? Or you go watch a movie, and at the end of 3 hours, there have been 3 item numbers, people have jumped up and down, there have been some scenes, but you didn't understand what the concept of what the gentleman was trying to say. What was the director, the scriptwriter trying to say? If you haven't been understood, then you haven't served your purpose. Similarities we need to look for. Sometimes in theatre we find that somebody is doing someone else's play which has been done before, and you say, I feel like I've seen this somewhere. Very often when you go for Hindi movies, you feel that, right? You go for Hey Baby and you see 3 men talking to one little baby, and you say, this sounds very much like an English movie which says 3 men and a baby. It sounds exactly like that. No, but it's different because it's in Hindi. So you have to look very carefully to see if it's been inspired, is a nice word, or if it's been plagiarized. And of course there's that rude thing about plagiarism and research. Plagiarism is when you copy from one source, and research is when you copy from multiple sources, okay, and write the references at the end. Many of them don't even write the references properly. So when you're guiding a paper, or you find that the guide is publishing a paper which is resembling the student's thesis, or the thesis has been inspired by another thesis, I say that most ideas for thesis come from the library, from the previous old thesis section of the library. They go pick up another thesis and try to modify it slightly and do the same thesis so that it's easy for them. So any similarities that you see like this between the pet and the master, and between what came first and what came later, you have to start becoming suspicious and check whether the ethical principles are being followed. Where do we draw the line as far as research is being concerned? We also, I'm sure a lot of this has been done in terms of stem cell research and things like that. Where are we headed? We're all worried about this. These are the kind of things that we're worried about. So if she's changed her husband to this side, anti-aging drugs have been given. In dermatology, everyone wants to look younger. So anti-aging drugs being given to the husband till he looks that young, much more manageable husband, I think, no, at that age. She just has to change the diapers once in a way, and he won't cause any other problems. But the dose may be a little high, and so the dose of the research that we're doing also may be a little high. We need to check on that. One important factor with all the with all the laughter and humor that we have, we must not forget the fact that we're primarily relating in a profession that is based on trust. And if we're losing this vital factor as we're interacting with our patients, researchers are interacting with their colleagues and so on. If we're losing this vital factor and we don't trust our colleagues, our boss who publishes a paper that you have done work on, putting his name first, do we trust our juniors to carry through with the task so that you say, please take a complete history and give informed consent, you're making sure that that same thing is being done. Does the patient, does the doctor anymore? And I think the question is very valid now in India because the trust factor is being lost. And does the doctor trust the patient to actually do what is being told? All these are really important. So the trust exercises will be done as part of this theatre workshop so that you learn how to trust somebody else and how to utilize this trust to best effect so that we don't lose on the trust factor. These are some of the things we'll touch upon, and Ashwin will be dealing with many of these things in the course of the workshop. Voice, the use of voice, the use of language effectively, whether it's local language or English. Talking skills, I talked about, listening skills, clarity of communication, non-verbal communication, watch out for body language and things like that. Team building, because a lot of research, medical care is related to a team, and it's important that every member of the team do their job effectively. The fact that we need to build up trust, certain basic principles, sticking to the script of the play. Some basic principles cannot be changed. Those are not compromisable. And we need to, on that, we need to innovate and learn to make sure that we use it to the best potential possible. All of you were reading the newspaper in the morning, so this is my revenge. In fact, even when the session was started, so it's important that we get started early with reading the newspaper and catch up with, because our patients are not fools. Our patients are very well educated. They're reading what's going on. So all these unethical research projects are coming in the paper. Unethical practices by doctors, unethical advertisements are there in the newspaper. And so they are very well informed. It's important that we be well informed also. We start with some introductions. We'll do an introduction to the exercises so you have an idea what kind of exercise we'll be doing in the morning. And we're going to clear up this room a little bit so that it's not this comfortable seating arrangement. You all will be sitting very little during the course of this morning. And we'll actually execute those exercises, do the exercises so that some of these things that I mentioned earlier will be done. And after each exercise, we'll have a debriefing session to see what we've learned from the exercise. In the afternoon, we'll have the performance on a CD, and any part of the performance which needs to be focused on will be done live for you. Ashwin?
Morning, everybody. As an introduction, could everybody stand up, please, and just push your chairs to the corner of the room. And just in case those of you who realize that we're going to do a lot of movement, want to escape, I've asked the people to lock the doors from outside. There's no escape. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now a little faster. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 1, 1, 1. Thank you very much. Okay, now I want everybody to be absolutely still. Take deep breaths. Breathe in. Out. Breathe in. Breathe in. Now when you are breathing out, I want you all to say, ha. This is just for your voice. Okay, to project your voice. Like we said, we don't like using mics because we'd like to project. Breathe in. Ha! Breathe in. Ha! Breathe in. Ha! I want all of you all to focus on me and try and knock me down with your ha. Okay, that's what you're trying to do. You don't like me, I made you do the funky chicken. Breathe in. Ha! That's right. Ha! The difference is, I want the ha to come from here and not from here. If you feel you're straining your throat, you're doing it wrong. That's the way you use voice. You use this rather than this. Okay, so. Ha! Ha! Oh, I heard a few ha's. Okay, once more. Just deep breaths. Now ha. Ha! Louder. That's right. Okay, now everybody, absolutely still. Deep breaths. Very silent. Now what I want you to do is get extremely comfortable with this space. We're going to be doing a lot of things today. So I want you all to feel this entire room and get comfortable working with each other, moving between each other. So I just want you all to walk extremely quietly all across the room. In between nooks and corners, everywhere, just walk. And another thing, whenever you pass anybody, I'd like you all to make eye contact and smile. When you pass someone, make eye contact and smile. Very quiet, absolute silence, and everywhere, in between each other, everywhere. Please, go. Can we do it really slowly now? Really slow. Very slow. Almost. And again, eye contact whenever you pass anybody. And feel the room. Go everywhere.
Good enough.
This is not just for us.
It's not sacred space.
You're everywhere, all over the room.
What is it?
No, I
And
walk
you
around.
don't let- and you don't let-
No, I stand and make eye contact.
No speaking. No speaking. No speaking. We'd like this to be like a non-verbal exercise of making people feel comfortable without actually saying anything. Okay, now slightly faster. 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 Much faster. Again, eye contact and smile. Eye contact and smile. Stop. The next thing, leisurely walk. Use the entire spaces. We're going to start very slow. Again, eye contact and pass. Ready? And make sure, the thing is, what helps is you're communicating with somebody with your eyes and you're accepting something. We need lots of vitamins and coffee actually. Fast. Okay. Reverse.
They just randomly reversing. Don't reverse it. Don't reverse it. We say reverse.
Reverse. Okay, everybody, just pick a partner, and I just want you all to introduce yourselves to your partner. Very short, keep it brief. Just tell them a little about yourselves, where you're from, whatever. Okay, does everybody have partners? Just check if you all have partners. Everybody. I have a partner. Everybody okay? Yes. Okay, we have one person there. You can partner with me. Okay. One at a time. I want one person to speak first. Go. My name is Ashwin. I'm from Bangalore. I work as a stand-up comedian and as a voice actor. I'm originally from Kerala but settled in Bangalore.
Which part of Kerala?
My mom is from Tiruvalla, my dad is from Koni.
My name is Nabil. Working as a...
Okay.
Turn your backs.
Turn your backs. With your backs facing each other. With your backs facing each other. Okay, now I want you to close your eyes and think of little details about the person you were talking to. What were they wearing? Glasses?
For you.
What color were their shirts, their salwars, their saris? Did you notice their watch? What did you notice most about them? How many questions can you answer to yourself about the person you were speaking to? Okay. Now, how many of you all felt that you all can answer quite a lot of questions? How many of you all felt that you could only remember what was being said, but you didn't notice what?
I remember.
All of them?
Yeah, I remember what my partner said, but not so many details.
Fair enough. A lot of people are saying that they remembered what their partner said, but you didn't really just. Is that a good thing? Do you think we can improve on that? Not just listening to somebody, observing the person as well, especially when you're talking to patients.
From childhood, we've been trained to focus on certain things. How many times have you gone to a party or a meeting or interacted one-on-one with somebody and found that they've actually told you their name and you've forgotten? You have no idea what that person's name is. And you have to be told many times, which is why I think this badge helps a lot. Because even on the 5th day or the 10th day of the workshop, sometimes you're talking to someone and you're quietly trying to peep at that card and see, what on earth is this person's name? I've been introduced to this person once before, but I can't remember the name. So we've learned to focus on what we think is important, and we've learned to cut out unnecessary details. But sometimes we find that we lose on a person-to-person contact because of that. How much nicer would you feel with a doctor whom you went for a revisit after 2 weeks? When you enter, if he says, "Hello Ashwin, how are you feeling now?" You feel much better. Okay, he remembers me. He knows what my problem is. He actually cares about me. And that makes a huge difference in practice, whether you're doing research or whatever field you're working in. When somebody remembers you by the name, in fact, one of the presidential elections in the US, where a janitor had organized a huge number of votes for the US president, and they asked him what was his motivation. Was he paid any money? He said no. After many years, when this presidential candidate came back to that building, when he entered, he said, "Hello, Harry, how are you? How was your wife? Last time when I came, she was not well." The fact that he had the interest to remember that my wife last time was not well, she had passed away meantime, made him feel that this man was really worthwhile to be a presidential candidate because he took individual attention in each person. So it's a huge difference. And when I was doing the exercise, I didn't know what Ashwin was going to ask. I was concentrating very hard on what my partner's grandmother-in-law, what the age was, because I thought they were going to ask some things. So again, purpose of this exercise would be, we tend to focus on things from which we think we're going to get benefit. As in, if I think somebody is watching me and this is what they're going to ask, I will focus on those things. I didn't think that they're going to ask, what color clothes are they wearing, or what do they look like, or what are their mannerisms, so I didn't focus on that at all. So sometimes we learn to cut out things which we think are not important, but may actually be very important for the other person. Ashwin had a question in that workshop, I think, at the end of the debriefing session. He wanted to know, would you have done the exercise better if you knew what the question was going to be? And I think the answer is obviously yes, no? So the same thing, how does it apply to anything that we've talked about in this bioethics workshop? A lot of times, if you think there's going to be a survey, somebody is watching, someone is monitoring. That's why so much of this monitoring goes on in research and things like that. If you are taking a class for students and you think that the principal or the dean is sitting in the back row and watching how good you are as a teacher, then you'll find everybody using those teaching skills, turning to the students, making eye contact, asking questions, making sure that everything is done according to the teaching exercises that are properly done. Why? Because the dean is sitting in the back row. Either way, looks like we need to follow the same principles, and that is very, very true as far as ethics is concerned, is that what we call the principle of the unseen observer. You have to imagine that at every time, and I suppose it's true of life, it's not anything to do with bioethics, we need to understand, since it's unseen observer, and then you won't be feeling nervous. The only person to be nervous about is yourself. But there is an observer checking that all those principles are being followed at every single time. Then we'll do a better job of whatever we're doing, whether it's medical practice or research project and so on.
What happens is if you are given a time, say 1 hour or 2 hour, by 15, 20 minutes, you tend to lose that the awareness that somebody is watching you. You come back to your normal self. So same thing, if he had said that you have to notice the color of the shirt or whatever, then you would have concentrated on that but left out the details, other details which you would have observed otherwise.
Probably stop listening as carefully. So imagine how difficult it is for theatre people on a stage where every single time they know that they are being observed. And that the purpose of the people sitting there after having paid for a ticket is to observe them. And probably all of us tend to be overly critical when we paid for a performance and gone there. So you're being observed all the time, and you're being observed by people who paid to see you and want to be critical of what you're doing. So you need to get over that. One good thing for me is that I wear glasses. So in every theatre performance, as soon as the stage lights have come on and the theatre lights have dimmed, I take off my glasses and go onto the stage. I can't see anyone in the audience. So my performance is completely to a sea of black faces whom I cannot see. Great advantage for me. Any questions from the first session?
Initially, maybe for the first 1 or 2 hours, we were conscious of this camera being focused at us, and we were also not sure when it would catch us, But after that, we just lost interest. I mean, I just did not bother much about the camera.
Correct, ma'am. Just like the Lok Sabha politicians have now become not conscious of the cameras, and they behave really badly in parliament.
It's all the conditioning of human behavior, human nature. You condition animals. You put a horse, some pads here. You want the horse to go in single direction. That's also conditioning. But human conditioning are there, where limitations are there. The parent limitations are there. Then the society limitations are there. He is not to. He is being washed everywhere. He is not into natural self. He is developed according to the society norms. Unlike what JK says, you have to condition by yourself and bud by yourself. What is the conditioning and unconditioned conditioning, or plant conditioning or natural conditioning?
This jargon makes no sense to me, sir. Roughly choosing the example of parenting, I think you'll have to have a combination of both. Certain ground rules have to be set down. When you're raising a child, if you're using the same example that you're using, certain ground rules are there. If an elder member of the family comes in and there's a 2-year-old who's throwing a tantrum and kicks the grandmother, then there are some ground rules which say that kind of behavior is not acceptable. But again, when choosing the example of a child itself, if it's drawing in a book and you've got this book where you're supposed to color inside the lines, and the child decides that it wants to color only outside the picture and use some colors which are not exactly the same as in the other page, you need to encourage people to think outside the box.
I'm not talking about the behavioral conditioning. I'm talking, I was born. I was made to realize that I am a Muslim. I have to follow this path. Nowhere I was a human being. Everywhere else, even a fellow born in a Hindu family is a human. You said you're a Hindu, you have to follow this religion, you have to go. Nobody was given a choice to become a human being. So he said, this is compartmentalization of that. That's what I'm asking. I'm not asking about how to paint, how to respect, how to this is what the first society came into existence. The older people saw the younger generation coming, they were scared of that. They'll push us down. They said, oh, there's God, you have to respect your elders, you have to do that. That society norms were bad. What line they were bad, I'm least bothered. But I said, as a human being, what are the conditions for a human being to grow?
Once you become the level of a thinking adult, I think you need to break out of the conditioning which is not reasonable and set up a conditioning for yourself based on your own ethical practices and standards.
Just everybody, we were speaking about awareness and how we need to increase our awareness. All of you all, could you just close your eyes, please? I'd like you all to think of the person you all were talking to. How many of you all can remember the names of the people you were talking to? Okay, we've established that we need to pay more attention. Now, how many of you all can remember, close your eyes please, everybody, close your eyes. How many of you all can remember things about this room? You all walked around the room a lot. How many boards there were? What were the colors of the walls? How many cameras there were? What kind of mics we were using? Okay, that's just everybody, you can open your eyes. It's just an example of how much more we need to just look. What is the necessity? Well, you all answer that question yourselves. It is important to notice things.